Good evening and welcome to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Much to get to here tonight as we talk about a team that is now the reigning Super Bowl champion for the second time in 4 years. What does this championship say about these Kansas City Chiefs? Was this Patrick Mahomes' finest season? Where does Andy Reid rank amongst the greatest coaches of all time? How much longer does Andy Reid coach, right? Some people speculating that maybe this was going to be it. What does this Super Bowl mean for Brett Veach? Starting to look a lot more like his team than it did certainly the last time. More impressive, the offensive line's performance or the defensive lines? James Bradberry's penalty. What do we think? Right call, wrong time. If the Eagles got the ball, would they have scored? Is this a dynasty? If it's not, what makes a dynasty? And do the Chiefs repeat? We break it all down here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
This is the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric is the senior VP of Research and Development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome. If you're joining us via the podcast later in the week, remember you can catch us live. We stream live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, I don't know, everything else we could possibly think of. You can catch us there and be a part of the conversation. Folks already lining up in the chat room to make their presence felt, as you heard. With us as always, Jeff Chadiha, the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 in Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Easy for me to say. Let's get to it, Jeff. Let's dive right in before I bumble something else. What does this championship say about these Kansas City Chiefs? What does this one mean for this team and where they're at?
I think it was more about resilience and toughness. I think the first championship was, they went through some things, but they were so talented and so explosive and a lot of veterans on that team. This was really more about a team that grew up before our eyes, a team that, I said this on your station earlier today. Like, there were so many guys on this team that we were questioning or critical of at the start of this year, throughout this year. And as the season went on, especially in the postseason, like, a lot of those guys became players, whether it was Orlando Brown Jr., whether it was Andrew Wiley, whether it was Frank Clark, all these rookies we knew nothing about. Isaiah Pacheco, your favorite running back in training camp, becomes a star in the Super Bowl.
What?
And so
I was all over him. I loved him.
Yeah. And so I think, I go back to seeing Mahomes at opening night, and I said this last week, just seeing all these young guys and seeing how giddy they were to be in this arena. And he almost felt more like a parent than a teammate in that moment, just watching them. And it really, his leadership this year, you see the impact of him as a quarterback. You see the impact on these young guys. I don't know if they're able to win the championship if he doesn't have the year he had as a quarterback, the leadership he bring, and these guys don't grow up in this. So to me, it was impressive to watch it, because I don't think you could have foreseen this in October, all these guys doing what they did, and certainly not a quarterback as great as he is playing through a high ankle sprain. I mean, it was an impressive run.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Eric, just overall, what this one means for the Chiefs?
Firstly, for everybody in the crowd here, I'm in Atlanta right now. I'm house shopping right now. I do look, my hair looks vibrant and full, I will say. I'm rivaling Petro there. I'm closer to Petro than I am Chadiha for the first time in a few shows here on the hair front. But let's be honest here. This Super Bowl was special, right? Like, I think this is one where you look and you say, not that many people were doubting the Chiefs so much as it's just unprecedented. We saw a team with a quarterback making a huge fraction of the salary cap. I think the biggest percentage of the salary cap since the salary cap era. You saw a team, Thomas is talking about, they won with a quarterback a running back in the 7th round who Soren and I thought wasn't very good. And, I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. He was fantastic down the stretch. He was amazing in the game Sunday. And a defense that only I believed in among the three of us, right? And a defense that, wasn't particularly good Sunday, but was good in the previous couple playoff games. This is a total team effort where, Mahomes got injured first playoff game. Defense kind of carried the squad for 2 games. And then in the Super Bowl where the defense really could not get a stop to save their lives. I mean, I think there was a 13 combined 3rd and 4th down conversions by the Eagles in that game Sunday. Patrick Mahomes just stepped up and was every bit the MVP. I mean, there are real questions about whether or not Mahomes had the best quarterback season of all time, given what he accomplished. And, I think about this and all the stuff that they overcame. I feel like this one is incredibly special, just to get back there, all the disappointments from last year. This is a great Super Bowl. And I think it's the icing on the cake for a few people. Obviously, Mahomes and Reid, I think there's no more flukiness to their career. There's no explaining away Andy Reid. There's no explaining away Mahomes. And then to, Soren, your point, I think Brett Veach, this is a team that Brett Veach built. And, the last Super Bowl is like, oh, Frank Clark, they made a mistake, but it didn't matter because Mahomes is great. The drafts prior to that weren't great. The 2 drafts prior to this season, 2021 and 2022, were absolutely fantastic. And so when I think about this team, I think about, this is a very special season and a season where, it's just the beginning, in my opinion, as far as where they're building this thing and where they're going.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it is. I appreciate the fact that, we heard Patrick Mahomes say, not a dynasty yet. I'm going to hold on that. We're not done yet. We have more to do. And I think, we're going to talk about that part of the conversation. Just the fact that there already is a realization about where they are. They don't seem to be just like, oh wow, this is great and it's magical. They seem to be enjoying it. They're taking, Patrick Mahomes has been to Disneyland and to Jimmy Kimmel, and the parade is coming, and they're certainly celebrating, which they've absolutely earned. There does seem to be a resoluteness about this team already. Andy Reid pretty much was like, I got scouting reports to look at. I'm swamped already. The way he was going about it, I think it says that, Patrick Mahomes is tremendously is one of the best of all time. And I heard Jeff talking about this, by the way, showering accolades. And if you read Jeff's column at NFL.com, you will see one of the more poignant breakdowns of Patrick Mahomes and just what he's accomplished. And it was a great read, by the way. I heard also Steven's dramatic reading of it. On 810
Fireside chat.
Yeah, which I thought was outstanding as well. But it's really a great breakdown. And I think it validates him as one of the greatest of all time. It validates Andy Reid. We're going to try to put him in place where exactly they are as one of the greatest of all time. And it pushes this franchise up into not quite the rarefied era. I think they're tied for 7th with 3 championships, but 3 championships is special, right? And so the whole organization, it validates Andy Reid's process. It validates Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback. That no one can call them lucky. It wasn't like, well, if you don't bat this pass down or you don't convert a 3rd and 15, you've done it twice now, and this time against what was a favored team and a fantastic team. So I think there's no way to even try to write this one off, right? This validates them as an outstanding team. Is that fair to say, Jeff, that if nothing else, it validates everything that happened against San Francisco? Because now you could say, yeah, okay, they didn't get it done against the Bengals. They didn't get it done against the Bucs. But 4 times they've been good enough to win it all. They've won it twice. That's really kind of what you're supposed to do, is win half the time you're up against quality opponents.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I must have misheard that or not seen it. I don't think anybody was invalidating what they did against the Niners, were they? I mean, was that like a narrative coming out of that game?
Well,
I feel like people felt like they won the game.
Well, I think like I think it is different when you win one with a quarterback on a rookie deal, right? Like you can paper over a lot of the mistakes, right? The Frank Clark, trade, the the defense wasn't particularly good. Like I think that the 2019 Super Bowl, you could explain away with, oh my God, you got lucky on a 3rd and 15. You got lucky that you faced it. Like you think about the 2019 Super Bowl, it's Deshaun Watson and Bill O'Brien. It's Tennessee Titans with Ryan Tannehill, and it's Jimmy Garoppolo in the Super Bowl. You could say, if that was the only Super Bowl they won, you could say that's kind of a Mickey Mouse kind of thing. But then you come through and you say, okay, they've beaten Buffalo twice in the playoff sense. That's a really good team. They finally get over the hump against Cincinnati, and then they beat a really good Eagles team. Like I think this Super Bowl ends the luck discussion about the Chiefs and and whether or not you want to call it a dynasty or not, that's fine. I actually don't. I think the Chiefs want more than just these 2 Super Bowls, but I think this one was like you stood toe to toe with a great football team that had all the advantages of a quarterback on a rookie deal, and you didn't, and you beat them. And that kind of validates kind of everything that's happened. I mean, think about this, Petro, on your show 2 weeks ago, you were talking about Scott Kaczmar and like, oh my God, if they lose 3 home conference title games, is this run even a real thing? Right. And now you're like, 2 Super Bowls, 3 Super Bowl appearances. Get out of my face. Like that's what the Chiefs did in this game.
Yeah, I think to your point, Jeff, you asked the question, is anybody really knocking them? Yeah, Eric just mentioned one of them. I mean, in some ways, didn't it turn you around? You had them, 10-7 on the season?
Yeah. Look, I think that was legitimate claim. I think there were reasons to have that concern. But would I say 10-7 and them not winning a championship? I've seen teams that have been the Green Bay Packers, for example, be 10-6 with 20 guys on IR win a championship. I've seen the New York Giants be 9-7 and win championships. I think teams can get hot and win championships. I don't think that is. I guess I look at it more like every season is different. Every season is in a vacuum. And so this team that won is way different than the team that won 4 years ago. And so I guess I never, and I give accolades to that team for what they did because they deserved it. I don't think, again, I'm looking at it nationally. I never heard anybody nationally say, oh, that team was just bored. They got lucky to win a championship. Andy Reid's lucky to have that one. I think from what I hear from people I deal with, it's always been great quarterback, great coach, great talent around them. Tough team to deal with. And so this game to me didn't change that in any way. It certainly, to me, and we'll get into some of this, in the rundown, but, certainly for Mahomes, it puts him into a category amongst other, not just football players, but other great athletes, with 2 MVPs and 2 championships and 6 seasons. And it puts Andy Reid into a position where he's got a second ring, which is very hard to get. And so, and as you said, the franchise. But I think anytime you have a talented quarterback and a talented coach, you have a chance to win a championship. Right. And so this, to me, doesn't validate anything. I think it was just they became the team to beat at the right time.
Yeah, I think, I do think there was a lot of Eagles picks in this. And I'm okay with that because I think the Eagles could have won the Super Bowl, right? This isn't about the fact that the Chiefs could never have lost to the Eagles. I think they could have just as easily lost to the Eagles as they could have beaten the Bengals last year in the AFC Championship game, right? Like, I think they're right where they ought to be. Either one of those games could have gone either way. Credit the winners for making the plays. I'm happy to credit the Bengals as long as the Chiefs are credited. I think there's a little bristling. I think there were a lot of people who picked the Eagles and then wanted to spend all Monday talking about the Bradberry call. And that was somehow like, oh, see, I still got it right. There was just a bad call. So there's always some naysayers. There's no doubt that nobody is questioning Patrick Mahomes and nobody is questioning Andy Reid now, right? Like, and I think that is still a little bit of the narrative that I would like to have thought that the 2-53 earned a little bit more credit in this game than they were certainly getting. I think there's still a little bit of a narrative that Andy Reid did his hocus pocus, and Patrick Mahomes is now certainly one of the great quarterbacks. But the rest of the guys were kind of along for the ride, and I don't think that's fair.
But you look at the team build. I mean, I think that this validates kind of the math, right? Which is that to say, if you host 5 consecutive AFC title games, you are going to win a couple Super Bowls, right? And whether that was last year, if you hang on against Cincinnati and you kill the Rams, like I think all 3 of us believe would have happened, or
I don't believe that.
You don't? Okay, well,
yeah, I'm not on that train.
Okay, well, anyway, so anyway, they got 2 Super Bowls, right, out of these 5, and we think mathematically speaking, like that's a right around punching around expectations. I think like there are some people in the media, there are some people in the world that are like, well, the 5 straight AFC title games, that's a little bit Mickey, there's illegitimate aspects to that. And like, I think this Super Bowl kind of wraps a bow around this idea that the last 5 years have been really impressive. And there were a lot of questions about, who's questioning that? I don't understand who's questioning.
I think they're not now. They're not now. That's the point. The question
there were Twitter threads that Soren talked about on his show where people were saying if they can't get home against the Bengals, I mean, people were like, Dan Orlovsky was literally saying, Dan Orlovsky's tone, ESPN, NFL Live was going, his tone went from, if they lose to the Bengals, Mahomes is the second best quarterback in the league. And then the week later, he's the second best quarterback all time on that same show.
Time out. We cannot, I will not allow us
But
Jeff, NFL Live and Dan Orlovsky. I think most people would agree.
I don't.
Chiefs have been great for the last 5 years.
I agree, but I mean, I think any reasonable person, and that is what sets you, me, and Petro apart, and that's why this is the best Chiefs podcast in the market. But there are real narratives. I mean, my brothers in Christ were putting up graphics the last 3 years saying who's got the quarterback advantage, and they would say Buffalo and Cincy. There were real live shows of people with real platforms who were saying these things about the Chiefs. And I think, and again, I'm not whatever. They probably use them as motivation. I get that they were favored in a lot of these games, but this team was an underdog in the game Sunday. The betting markets, which I respect greatly, had the Chiefs installed as underdogs. And I think
I don't think
they should have been, but
I don't think Eric's wanting to celebrate those that have said it. But you said who's saying it? There were a lot of people. The entire Fox set on game day. I don't know because I know you were at the press box. I don't know if you could hear it, but every one of them picked the Eagles.
Everybody on NFL Network show with everybody on the NFL Network show prior to the pregame, everybody on the Fox pregame show. I mean, we're talking, and again,
we're talking 10 people. I mean, let me ask you guys this. Do you guys really think if you polled 100 people, like 98 would say the Eagles are going to win that game? Like I talked to people all week, and about half said Chiefs, half said Eagles.
Yeah, but are we supposed to count my mom at the same we count Howie Long, Jimmy Johnson, Terry Bradshaw? I mean, they're supposed to be the football experts, and they were across the board on the Eagles.
Jeff, people were talking about what if they go 0-4 against the Bengals? Do the Bengals own the Chiefs? Like this is a team. You take a step back and you say has made 5 straight AFC title games, 3 Super Bowls, and has won 2. There is not another NFL team that owns them, right? But for a brief moment, we were told that the Bengals own the Chiefs. And again, all this is to say the cream rose to the top on Sunday in a big way. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid asserted themselves dominantly, and Brett Veach, who I have maligned before. I did not like the Frank Clark deal. I did not like the Edwards-Helaire draft pick. There have been a number of things, but you have to tip your cap to that front office that built a team. There was not one wide receiver, Jeff, who played a snap on offense Sunday, who played it on the team last year. Like that, I mean, the Chiefs, no matter how you slice and diced it, were a brilliant team for the last 5 years.
But I don't think anybody's, again, I just don't. It drives, and I see this on radio shows all the time. It's just like everybody's saying this, and it ends up being Skip Bayless is saying, "Go watch Nick Wright for like 20 minutes. First things first.
Nick's a
You'll get all the Chiefs love you have to get.
He's a Kansas City guy.
Yeah,
he's a Kansas City guy. Listen, I'm with you. Not everybody is. Let's not bog down on who picked what.
But there were significant doubts about the Chiefs and what this 5 years meant. And if they lose Sunday
I think
or they lose against the Bengals,
what this 5 years meant, I think that's a bridge too far for me. I think that people thought legitimately they would take a step back because of the Tyreek Hill stuff. I don't think anybody was discounting what they'd done before, who Patrick Mahomes was, I just have I haven't heard that. And I've been in a lot of national conversations.
Yeah, I think that this win cements this team. I'm not using the dynasty word yet. I want to see them win another Super Bowl before I think 3 is kind of the magic number. Dallas, San Francisco in the 80s, the Steelers in the 70s, all that kind of stuff. Like, I think they're a Super Bowl away from that word, but I do think that this cements them as, when you talk about the history of the NFL, you cannot talk about it without this version of the Chiefs. Like, I think that has been cemented. And if they lose the Super Bowl or they lose the Bengals and they don't get home and maybe they trail off because of, the quarterback's contract and all this kind of thing, like, I think that it just changes history. And that's why, what I said at the very beginning, I think this one is very special.
Am I the only one that's hearing Eric like he's popping all over the place? Is that just me?
Yeah, he's popping a little bit. Usually I'm the one with the mic problems.
I know. So I don't know if you need to bounce out and bounce back in, but there's a lot of it's not getting better. So you might think about if I don't know if you got something on your mic that's scraping against it or what's going on, but take a look at it. But we'll get Eric back in here.
Left.
I know, because I think he's trying to log out and log back in and see if that makes it better. But let's talk about this. Was it Patrick Mahomes' finest season in your mind, Jeff?
Yes, without question. I mean, look, obviously generational talent. I said it. If he lost this game, if his career ended on February 5th, he would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think just talking to people during the week, seeing how he's played, what he's had to deal with the last couple of games, that high ankle sprain is no joke. And to me, I can only think of 2 times in my career where I've seen guys do things that just blew my mind physically. One was when Rod Woodson tore his ACL in, 95, and came back 5 months later and played in the Super Bowl, lost to Dallas. And when Terrell Owens broke his leg for Philly when Andy had him and came back and played in the Super Bowl 6 weeks later. I mean, what he did, the pain he had to go through was next level. And then just, again, I mean, the testament to any great quarterback, as Andy said, we all know, is you make players better. And you go back to the offseason, him getting these guys together. You go back to him trusting the offense. He's talked about the importance of his footwork, not getting away from that. Going through his progressions, not leaving the pocket too early. It's Brett Veach talked about this when I saw him last week. And he said, look, that Cincinnati game last year, the AFC Championship loss, left a sour taste in our mouth. He didn't come out and just say, we talked to Patrick about it. I think Patrick was smart enough to understand this, but I think Andy, Veach, the way they put this team together, the way they approached the offseason was with the mindset of, if people are not giving us the big play, we have to take what they give us. And so numbers-wise, yeah, he put up the big numbers again and the passing offense, all that stuff. But the leadership, I said it earlier today too. He won a game playing like Alex Smith. His numbers in that game were Alex Smith numbers. But he took what people gave him. He managed the game. He had to be perfect with a lot of short passes in the second half. 2 years ago, he wouldn't have played that way. He would have tried to press it. He would have tried to make a big play, and he might have turned the ball over. You don't win that game if they have one turnover. And so I think that game epitomized his growth as a quarterback. And to me, yeah, I mean, he's had, obviously bigger numbers and more touchdowns, a lot of stuff. But as far as leadership and growth and understanding the position and doing the little stuff, it's not even close.
It's finest season, Eric, in your mind, for Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the best seasons of all time. By the way, do I sound okay?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. One of the best seasons of all time. To Jeff's point, the other day, the longest pass completion was 22 yards, right? Like, that was, we just posted a graphic, by the way, at Sumer Sports on Twitter. The longest pass completions of the season by air yards. So like basically how far it traveled. You know what quarterback wasn't on the list this year? Patrick Mahomes. Right. Because everything, the teams were playing the too high stuff. They were making Patrick be, patient. They were making him be efficient. They were making him throw a catchable ball. There weren't that many drops this year. Obviously, they had a lot with Tyreek last year. They had a lot with even more with Kelsey than normal. This year, Valdez-Scantling had 5 or 6, but like for the most part, they caught the football this year. And I think a lot of that has to do with the quarterback too and kind of ball he's throwing. This was, and I come back to this. The sign of a dynasty is winning the championship multiple ways. And, in 19, it's, win with big plays, win with, scoring quickly, kill teams with just explosiveness. And you think about that second half, we talked about it in the last show, like what happens if the Chiefs don't possess the ball that much in the first half, right? That was a question we had last week because you saw with the Bengals game, they only possessed the ball, 4 times in the first half of the Bengals game. Same thing this week. And, in the second half, Reid and Mahomes, they knew that to score, it was going to have to go play by play. It was going to be step by step. You're going to have to cross the street 1 million times every single possession. And they did get aided by Tony's return. And they, certainly that way. But the other drives were methodical. They were, little by little. And that shows, I think, an evolution in Mahomes' game that, we weren't sure if he had it. And I think, to Jeff's point, the Bengals game last year showed that there's always a little bit, it's always a little bit whether or not, questions were answered. I'll just say that.
By the way, I put up there that because Eric has changed to a different camera angle that it said, good Lord, it feels like I'm being taught to. The way Eric's looking. The other thing that people should know that are catching us via the podcast, we have our names up here on the stream. Like adults, I have Soren Petro. Jeff has Chadiha, Jeffrey Chadiha. Eric has Right About the Chiefs again. He has put up there for his name in here. Listen, I will say this. I think the one part about Patrick Mahomes, the leadership is absolutely there. I mean, he's always been the guy when you can flat out ball. You're one of the leaders, whether you should be or not, by your personality or your character or what you do. But when you have the character, you have the experience, and you can flat out. But that's Patrick Mahomes, and I think that's the one thing. To your point, Jeff, about not going down the field, and Eric talking about not being one of the top guys and going down the field. He showed that he's willing to do whatever it takes to win. However, whatever it means. Statistically, piled up a lot of numbers, but not the way he'd normally go about getting them. He kind of got there almost by default, this year with those numbers. And so, yeah, I think for sure it's his finest season, right? Like some of the best performances I've seen from guys, they don't win, right? Tom Brady's best performance was in losing the AFC Championship game in 15 to the Denver Broncos. He was under massive duress the entire time, and he kept the Patriots in it and took the Broncos all the way to the wire. Alex Smith's best performance was in New England against the Patriots in a losing effort where he kept them around, got them to within a score. He was under duress that entire game. That was by far his best performance. To your point, Jeff, about like Patrick Mahomes limping out there and going through not having his A game because he physically couldn't just run around, but yet still finding the way to do it. Yeah, his finest performance to finish his finest season. He didn't get to play the way he necessarily wanted to play. He played the way he needed to play to win. Yeah. And that's what it's all about, right? This was a Brady-esque season, even though he had the numbers. You almost wish that he'd only thrown for like 4,400 and 36 touchdowns. Maybe not led the league, because it masked the fact that he really did play the game he needed to play to win and not play the game that would create the most glorious highlights for SportsCenter.
Yeah, no question. I mean, there was a lot of, sometimes this word was used, sometimes it wasn't, but it was always inferred. There was a lot of humbling, after last season, a lot of humbling this year. And I think when you're a mesmerizing talent, I was watching this Netflix documentary about the 2008 Olympic team, basketball team, and they were just trying to, it's called the Redeem Team because they lost 4 years earlier. And so they had all these stars together, LeBron and Kobe and, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony. And they were talking about when you're a great player, a lot of times you feel like you can do it all by yourself. And sometimes you have to understand that there are going to be times when you can't do it that way. And I'm not saying Patrick saw it that way, but I think Patrick could do so many amazing things that it was like, I just need to get to the place where I can do it and it can happen. And I think that championship game loss to the Bengals, I think it changed him in ways that I think for the first time, like he was part of the problem in a big game. And I think that it allowed him to go into this offseason with the mindset of, I even think now that losing Tyreek Hill was not the motivation. The motivation was, screw this, I'm a better player than that. And I'm going to be a better player than that moving forward. And so, like you said, whatever it takes to be that kind of player, to get that taste out of my mouth, I'm going to do that. And I think that's what happened to him. I think that he really grew from that situation. And I think Matt Nagy kept saying it over and over again this season. He's so locked in on the opponent and what he has to do to win the game. And that just showed up on Sunday.
Yeah, it was no doubt an incredible performance by an incredible player that really can't be doubted at this point in his career. How about Andy Reid, Eric? What did this do for Andy Reid, getting his second championship and his fourth Super Bowl appearance? Beating the Eagles, beating a great defense in the Eagles, hanging 38 points, not being stopped at all in the second half. All that. What did that do for his legacy?
It cements it, right? And everybody will give Jeff a little bit of crap for being, not so goo goo gaga over the Chiefs all year. Like, I'll take a little bit of heat. I thought Reid at times, didn't bring out his best stuff all the time. And on Sunday, I mean, my goodness, that was one of the best coaching performances I've ever seen. And I know that, the fourth down, and that's not really Andy's specialty or his strength. And I think against Sirianni, it showed up even more because Sirianni pressed that edge, at least until the second half. But, even the first drive of the game was a great drive. The second drive of the game was a great drive. They moved the ball at will, even in the first half for the most part. But the second half, when you think about 4 consecutive drives where I don't think he missed once as far as play calling, and the quarterback only threw 1 incompletion in the second half. I was watching the first touchdown, the touchdown to go ahead, and I would look over my wife and I was like, hey, I think they're going to run the jet sweep to Kadarius Toney. And of course, Andy fools me and the Eagles defense, and they run the fake jet sweep, and he's wide open. And actually, when you think about that, also an easy throw for Patrick, right? Like that was a throw where, he was so wide open that, Mahomes could just kind of fling it out there without having to put stress and strain on his foot. Just an Hall of Fame performance, right? And you think about him, and he's now has as many Super Bowl wins as Don Shula. He's multiple. I just think you think about him, and he's one person now that Mahomes is there that you have to take a step back and really look at the totality of everything and realize how truly great he is. And on Sunday, I think, it was a very mesmerizing performance by Andy Reid.
Yeah, you mentioned the Tom Coughlin, Don Shula, Mike Shanahan, Tom Landry. The 2 Super Bowl club is pretty elite. What I think puts it into perspective, and maybe the next thing he really needs, Jeff, is to reach the 3. Because if you go to 3 or more, you're down to 4 guys. Bill Walsh, Joe Gibbs, they're the 2 at 3. Chuck Noll at 4 and Bill Belichick at 6, right? That's what's in front of him.
What's the number you're talking about here? You're talking about championships?
Super Bowl.
Okay.
Super
Bowls. Like all-time wins.
Okay. We go back to, Vince Lombardi and George Halas and Paul Brown. There are other guys that have multiple, Curly Lambeau, that have multiple NFL championships, but in the Super Bowl era, those are the guys that and I probably left out 1 or 2 with the 2s that are there. But I think what's amazing is now when you look at his career previous to Patrick Mahomes, that to me is what shines now, right? Like, because when you compare his pre-Mahomes to Belichick's pre and post Tom Brady, he destroys it. right? Like, he destroys Chuck Noll after, the little bit without Terry Bradshaw or even Terry Bradshaw on the downslope. I mean, he blows away the guys that did it all with one quarterback, right? That's what he has over all those guys. Where does it put him in your mind?
The 5 best coaches I've ever seen in my career: Bill Belichick, Bill Walsh, Jimmy Johnson, Bill Parcells, Joe Gibbs. That's my top 5. And so Andy is probably 6 right now. I mean, he can move up, like you said, another win, Super Bowl win, more regular season wins. I go with those 5 guys, not just because of Super Bowls or because of win total. It's because of total impact. Like Bill Walsh, West Coast offense. Bill Parcells, Lawrence Taylor. I mean, that's Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson probably would have won 5 Super Bowls with that Dallas team if he had stayed. Probably might have won 6 or 7. And just an amazing motivator, personnel guy. Joe Gibbs, we know, 3 championships with 3 different quarterbacks. I mean, that's where I start to look at it. And Belichick with the 7 rings, great defensive mind, maybe ever. So Andy, great offensive mind. Got to respect what he's done with 2 different franchises. Certainly one of the best play callers in the history of the game. And I don't think there's any dishonor in being at that spot. And I think it's sometimes we want so badly to justify somebody's greatness by comparing it to somebody else's greatness. And I don't think that that's really fair. I talked about this with Patrick, and somebody just mentioned, is he on the Mount Rushmore? I mean, he's been playing he's been a start for 5 years. And I think Stephen St. John on your station was like, he's the number 2 quarterback for me all time. And I'm like, he might get there, but I can't put him over Dan Marino right now or Joe Montana or, people like that, because I respect their careers and their longevity. I think Andy has done it long enough now where you can compare him to those people. I'm not even talking about like the Paul Browns and the Vince, Lombardis and people like that, Curly Lambos. I mean, he's done great things and he's one of the greatest coaches ever. But I think you have to also respect what other people have done and their own legacies.
But you can put him above them and still respect them.
Yeah, would you put him above those 5 guys?
Give me the 5 again.
Bill Walsh, Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells, Jimmy Johnson, Joe Gibbs.
Bill Parcells, Jimmy Johnson. I would sit in. Those are the ones that I'm the most eager to say yes. It's a good question. It makes me want to put pen to paper and take a look at their full bodies of work. I think yes over Bill Parcells, and yes over Jimmy Johnson. I mean, we can't be talking about the longevity of Dan Marino and Tom Brady in comparison to Patrick Mahomes and not respect the longevity of Andy Reid. Second most total playoff wins, second most total playoff games. What is he? He's above both those guys in total wins. The other guys are the ones that have more championships. Joe Gibbs is the one that I've always said, I don't know where he ranks, but he's definitely on the Mount Rushmore because he won 3 championships with 3 quarterbacks, none of which are going to the Hall of Fame. That's something that nobody else has. Yeah. And so I think Joe Gibbs is the one guy that will always be in my top 4 until a bunch of guys do what he did. But yeah, I think I would. I think first glance, and I reserve the right to look up some things and change my mind.
And this is just recent guys. I'm not talking about the old timers.
Yeah, and which is fine. Which is it's tough to measure. What was it to run the sweep 75 times in practice for Vince Lombardi versus the dynamic play designs that Andy Reid has. But yeah, I think I would. I mean, because I think his body of work with Donovan McNabb and Alex Smith is off the charts. And I nobody else has the guys that are never going to see the Hall of Fame that had the kind of success that he had. It's amazing.
Jimmy Johnson won 2 championships with a lousy quarterback.
He did. And that's one of the most compelling things. Not a lousy quarterback. It's the worst Hall of Famer ever. I never said he was a lousy quarterback. I just said he's the worst Hall of Famer ever. That's all. All right. How much longer does Andy Reid coach? Eric, you got a gut instinct on this one?
What else is he going to do? He doesn't seem like he's much for anything else, right, guys? I feel like it's at least 3 to 5 more years, unless like the health gets in the way. And I know he's a bigger guy, and people have always worried about that. But I think it's going to be 3 to 5 more years, especially now when you think about them letting the enemy go. Probably to be the offensive coordinator somewhere after the Chiefs. With Matt Nagy, like there's not really a succession plan for him so much in Kansas City. I think he's around for a while, and I know you guys didn't ask me, but I think he's looking at like a guy like Shula, right? Like when you look, how many wins is he away from Shula? Like 90?
I think there's a lot. Well, Belichick's in the way there, so Belichick's going to get there first.
Yeah, I don't think I think Belichick is probably out of Reid's range as far as Super Bowls and obviously, all-time wins. But like if he could pass Shula, like you're talking about, possibly the best coach of all time. And given given Reid's one-on-one record against Belichick, I think that's maybe a comfortable, like when you think about like 90 wins, how many seasons is that? That's, 6 or 7 or so for him. That could be, kind of where he shoots. That'd be ambitious for him. But given who the quarterback is and given like how well positioned they are now, that it could be a while.
329 is Bill Belichick, and for counting playoff wins, 329 is Bill Belichick. Andy Reid is 269. Talking about 60 wins behind. Don Shula checks in at 347 when you put the combined wins together. So 347 to 269.
That's a long way away.
It's a long way away, but it's really like
standing still though.
At this pace, it's like 8 years, 7 years maybe. He's averaging well over 12 wins a year with Patrick Mahomes, and we're talking playoff wins as well. He could do it in the 7th year, right? That is a long way, but
I don't think Andy Reid would say what he said to Jay Glazer if he's not thinking about the end game right now.
Well, I should have pulled the cut. I asked Andy Reid directly about that today on his Zoom. And I said, listen, the report was out there. What was the deal on that? Because you seem to say exactly the opposite after the game. Can you clarify where that report came from? He said, listen, I had 1 million people ask me that question. He said, Jay Glazer asked me that question at the end. He said, I said something to the effect of, I'm not thinking about it right now. He said, I'll think about that later. He said, that became an answer. He said, at no point was I ever thinking about retirement. I'm not retiring, and I was not thinking about it. So he completely shot that down. Today. And
you only let one legend retire at a time, and Chad Henne, Michigan, Blue, hung him up after the game. You can only have one at a time.
Yeah, the first time I met Andy Reid, I was my first year at Sports Illustrated. He was sitting behind a big desk in his office with 2 PR guys behind him, and he was literally one of the toughest interviews I ever had. Every word that came out of his mouth was measured. I don't think that there is ever a time when he would make that kind of misstep. He might have regretted it after the fact that he wasn't more resolute, but I don't think he got worn down and all of a sudden was just like, oh, yeah, okay.
I disagree. I totally disagree. I totally think Jay Glazer screwed that up. That's where I stand.
I don't know.
You quote me on that.
Yeah, I say that because he had quotes about in the same report about what enjoying it more, wanting to I don't know what the phrase was, but it's basically about like smelling the roses and taking it all in and all this stuff. I don't think he's coaching beyond 5 years. He's 64. He's had a great run. I think it's very hard, as Al Davis told me a long time ago, to do this job longer than 10 years. He's done it for almost 25 years with 2 different franchises. I think he's enjoying the hell out of himself right now.
Sure.
But he's also, we're all fathers here. He's lost one son. He's had another son put in jail within the past year. That stuff wears on you. I mean, he may put a good face on in public, but it's not easy to do what he does every day and have that kind of stuff in your personal life. And like Eric mentioned, he had a health scare last year. He's a bigger man. Dennis Green was somebody who I covered for a long time, who was also a heavier guy, and he died at 67. I'm not trying to get into Andy's head here and his mind or say wish any ill will on him, but I think there was a part of him that is probably very content with what he's accomplished. And I think that second Super Bowl might be enough for him. I don't think he's chasing rings. I think he wants to enjoy the ride, but it would not surprise me the least if he said, you know what, this is in a really good place. And maybe it's Matt Nagy, maybe it's Eric Bieniemy, maybe one of these young guys who's on my staff gets to take this over and run with it. But I don't think he's going to be coaching Patrick Mahomes when he's 70 years old.
We could talk about Bieniemy tomorrow on Too Deep, but I will tell you, and I may be dead wrong on this. I don't think he's close to retiring. In fact, I think he's the kind of guy that the only thing that will get him to walk away is if there is a health problem that he physically can't do it. I think he's Joe Paterno. I think he is Bear Bryant. I think he is those guys that it will take a health problem to take him away from the game. I'm telling you, listening to him today, he pretty much was like breaking down. We're breaking down tape. We're doing the exit interviews. Yeah, he was on to he's on to 23 already.
Hey, remember, he worked for Mike Holmgren. And Mike Holmgren.
Which agreed. Which when I heard that report, that's what I thought. He's going Mike Holmgren and he's walking away. And then I asked some people and they're like, yeah, that's not him. Haven't heard that. Haven't heard anything like that. And then when I asked him today, it was like, no, that's not that. Again, I might be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong.
Yeah, but I'm not saying it's imminent. I'm not saying he's retiring this offseason or anything. I'm just saying that knowing the coaches who are his peers and his group, all those guys he coached with at Green Bay, the Tony Dungy's, the Bill Cowher, all these guys who have moved on, like he interacts with these people. And at some point, it's a great job, but I think Belichick really is only sticking around to kind of get to chase down Shula. But I don't think Andy's in a place where that kind of stuff can drive you to stick around for 10 years to kind of get those kind of accomplishments. I think he's solidified his place in the game. I don't think there's anything left to prove.
I'm not predicting he will top Bill Belichick. I think he's got a good shot. I think he's got a decent chance at Don Shula, but I agree. I think Belichick's going to try to put the number out there. By the way, the Red Gold and Bold podcast proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Any parking lot needs you have, they are happy to help out. Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994, and now hiring for all positions. Project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance among some of the benefits packages. You can check it out at GannAsphalt.com for more information. Work for one of Kansas City's leading locally owned and operated companies, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Online, find all the answers you need at GannAsphalt.com. How about Brett Veach? What does this do for Brett Veach, Eric? Let's start with you. We're looking at, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the only players that were acquired before Brett Veach became the general manager on this roster are Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Andrew Wiley, Derek Nottie, Chris Jones, Harrison Butker, and James Winchester. There are guys that were there, left, and came back. Blake Bell was there, left, and Brett Veach has brought him back. So there are a couple of those on the roster. I think that's right. I did that. I eyeballed that real quick and did it. What does this mean for Brett Veach's legacy here?
Yeah, not to mention the fact that Mahomes is much like I think thought of as the guy that Veach identified. Obviously it's a team effort there as well. I said this on my other podcast for Sumer Sports, the Sumer Sports Show with myself and Thomas Dimitrov. I said, this has been a gradual ascension for Brett Veach. When Brett Veach took over as the general manager in 2017, July, he was very much a backseat player to Andy Reid, right? And I think last year, when it came down to playing, Thornhill over Sorensen, and it came down to eventually, I know you guys were making fun of this on the show on 810, playing Bolton over some of the other guys, Ben Neiman and so forth last year. Now to this year where, they moved away from the comfort zone of Steve Spagnuolo, trade Tyreek Hill, let Tyrann Mathieu go, the last two drafts. I think you really have to consider Brett Veach at least the shotgun rider in this car and sometimes the driver. And, I think this Super Bowl, and back to what I said at the very beginning of the show, I think the 2019 Super Bowl, I don't know how much, I think it was reasonable to say, hey, Brett Veach, you're kind of a spectator in this. I think this Super Bowl, Brett Veach deserves as much, if not more, credit as anybody in the organization. This is a not before seen Super Bowl victory in the salary cap era. And he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for the roster that they built around Patrick Mahomes.
How about it? And by the way, I think Derek Nottie was a 2018 draft pick, so he was a Brett Veach draft pick as well. So it means even more of this roster was on his watch. What did it do for you as far as Brett Veach's stature?
It was a critical separation between him and Andy. And when you come in the way he came into this job with John Dorsey getting bounced out, and he was the successor and had that relationship with Andy, it was very easy for people to see him as being Andy's right-hand guy as opposed to the general manager. And this was the first opportunity to go from being that to being, hey, I'm doing some serious stuff here. We're not just riding on the coattails of guys who were picked before I showed up. I have a vision for this team. And to be honest with you, and Andy gave him credit for this, like to be able to see that vision through both this year and last year in the offseason acquisitions, and to be able to have it play out so quickly is super impressive, because he went out and got guys that, and we all were like, is MVS going to really do something here? Is Juju going to stay healthy? The move for Kadarius Toney at midseason was brilliant. And Orlando Brown worked out for him in the end. I mean, I don't think we talk about the money he'll get later on or what he's trying to get out of this, but in the end, you won a championship with the guy. And Frank Clark got you 2 championships, despite all the things that went on with him throughout this process. So, yeah, I don't think that there's any question that when you have all these rookies playing, you have all these free agent moves work out for you, and you're in a year where you're going through a reset, and you just traded one of the best receivers in the game, a guy that's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame. I think you have to. If you're Brett Veach, you're sitting there with your feet up on the table, smoking a big old cigarette like Patrick Mahomes' dad, and feeling really good about life, because 2 years ago when he lost to Tampa, you're trying to figure out how can we rebuild this offensive line and keep this thing going. I think in a lot of ways, he went through his own humbling process of like the way he built this team originally, which was to be a dominant juggernaut, super explosive team, to saying, I got to find the right guys who can fit in here and work with this quarterback and have this quarterback work with them. And so the blueprint that he put in place was masterful.
Yeah, it was. And I think I love what you said there, Jeff, that he kind of checked himself, right? Like I'd never looked at it that way, that it was kind of like, okay, I've been doing the greatest show on turf. Now we got to, not just like, okay, Tyreek Hill's got to go, but they didn't just try to go recreate Tyreek Hill. In a way they did. They went out for Kadarius Toney, but they obviously didn't like the asking price in the offseason. I mean, we heard when they finally got him, that they tried to work a deal, couldn't get it done. And the price became what they needed it to be, which, by the way, that ended up being a really big pick, the longest punt return in Super Bowl history, and was vital in setting up one of their scores in the second half. So, I think that's a great point. And, I don't think it's easy to walk. We'll see now. We're going to start getting into the point where he's going to walk on guys that he drafted too.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's one of the things, like, hey, he's looking at that list going, almost all these guys are my guys now.
Yeah.
But now
more style.
Some of his guys, right?
But you think about what I think about when I think about this roster is resilience, right? Like this is, Legarius needs a fabulous player, and they got Trent McDuffie, and notice Trent McDuffie played almost all of the slot snaps on Sunday, right? So you got 2 guys now that can kind of play interchangeably. So when the Legarius Sneed goes down in the AFC title game, you don't fall apart. We all make fun of MVS, and I think like he deserves it a little bit because he did not perform, I think, up to his contract. But when all those wide receivers go down in the title game, he performed, right? And Juju performed, in the Super Bowl, and Sky Moore was a draft pick. By the way, that was the first time the Sky Moore pick was the first time Brett Veach ever traded down in his regime, was this year. Sky Moore scores a touchdown in the Super Bowl. And, you think about, 2 years ago, they traded a 2021 draft pick to move back into the 2020 draft and take something called Bo Peep Keys, right? And they're not doing that kind of stuff anymore. And just a little bit of, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we're looking at 6 draft picks and saying, okay, how do these guys piece around? We made fun of Darian Kennard, Soren, but that is the one draft pick that sucked this year out of 10, and so he just played the numbers game. To your point, I think the right phrase is he checked himself and he said, look, I'm not a brilliant evaluator. I need to play the numbers game because that's the way to win in the NFL. And he did. And I think that's a really great, I think the math would say over the course of years and years and years, it's difficult to outdraft teams, right? So instead of trying to hit a home run on every pick, you hit 10 singles, right? And that's enough to sort of win in the NFL, and especially when Mahomes is your quarterback, and being able to change tone, mid-career, I think that's incredibly impressive.
More impressive from this game, Jeff. O-line or D-line? O-line allows no sacks. Or maybe I should say the O-line or the defense. Chiefs defense limits the Eagles to just 11 points in the second half. Which one was a more impressive showing?
Offensive line. But it's a tough call, but I'll go offensive line just because I thought there was no way they were going to keep the Eagles from getting at least 1 sack in this game. If you had said 0 sacks, I would have. I'm not a gambler, but I would have bet the house on that. And I was on record as saying I thought Andrew Wiley and Orlando Brown were huge, huge weak spots for a defense like this. And now, look, they did some, to Andy's credit, they did some smart things. They chipped them on the edge. They ran the football. They didn't allow themselves to get in the third and long situations. It only happened maybe 2 or 3 times. Patrick got the ball out quick, and they stuck with that plan. And so they stuck with it when it probably wasn't easy. Going back to the start of the second half when your quarterback was banged up and you're down 10 and you're probably worried about, hey, this team's on the way to controlling the football for about 35, 40 minutes in this game. We're going to get so many drives in here. How are we? It felt to me like they were getting into a place where they were going to have obvious passing downs, and that was going to be a bad spot. And they found a way through game planning and through the efforts of that front. And to be honest with you, the surface helped too. Because as someone noted, it was the worst field in the history of the Super Bowl, and guys were slipping and sliding all over the place. And so they found a way to make it happen. But at the end of the day, it's it wasn't just one thing, but they deserve credit because that was a great defensive line with a whole bunch of big numbers, and they shut them out.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah, we haven't even talked about this, but you described short yardage, 3rd and 1 as Mount Everest for this team. And, I think they also run blocked, very well. And I know the Eagles were, by their own admission, because they went out and got the, Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh during the middle of the season, a weaker run defense. But they also ran the football incredibly well. And I think the offensive line deserves a lot of credit there. They were able to pick up short yardage plays. They were able to move the sticks when Patrick, you remember the first drive of the second half, it was run from under center. And a lot of those, stretch plays where he had to go get Pacheco to give him the ball, that didn't look pretty for Mahomes, right? The first drive of the second half. And the Chiefs offensive line was very good opening holes for Pacheco and McKinnon and folks. So yeah, it's Chiefs offensive line. And I do agree. I think the Eagles were hurt a little bit by the surface, but they were also on skates in the run game by the Chiefs offensive line. So very impressive performance there. They did it when it mattered most, and it was very impressive.
By the way, we're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, who are now hiring all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based on your experience with paid time off and insurance, among some of the benefits, just some of the benefits that they've got. Check them out online at GannAsphalt.com for more info. And of course, if your business has any problems with their parking lot, GannAsphalt.com. Or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lots. The James Bradberry penalty. What was your reaction to it, Jeff?
I have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm this way. I'm consistent when it comes to officiating, man. It's like you can call a play anytime you want. You can call a penalty anytime you want. He copped to it. So it's not like really a question where he wasn't really arguing it. And as you watch it in real time, it happens. So they were given a lot of problem with that route, that whip route, they call it. And, you saw Bradberry, I think the Eagles, one thing that probably wasn't discussed enough in their secondary, as good as they were, like those guys are very aggressive when it comes to reading stuff and trying to, they play with their eyes a lot. They like Marcus Peters. They try to see stuff happening, and that's kind of how they got caught out of position on a couple of those plays that the Chiefs scored on, the Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, and it's also hurt Bradberry in that situation. You saw him looking in the backfield and gave a little tug, and the ref saw it, and so that didn't lose them the game. They didn't play good enough defense overall in the second half to win the game.
Your thoughts on the penalty, Eric?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, like, can we pause for a second and educate Chiefs Kingdom, though? Like, Carl Cheffers was never against your team.
Yeah.
Officiating errors are, I call them mean zero, which means they're not biased towards anybody. We talked, after the Houston game, everybody's like, oh, this guy's throwing the game and stuff like that. No, like, come on. But, it was a penalty. And I know you're at the mercy of whether or not it's called. I think Eagles fans, you look back and say, well, could they have called it on Bradberry early in the game against Juju? Does that change the complexion of the game? Could they have called? I didn't think it was a catch and fumble at the beginning of the second half, but that was borderline. You had the catch by Goddard, which I didn't think was a catch. Like, there were plenty of officiating mistakes on both sides. This one was not a mistake. It was a borderline call. And Bradberry did infract. So the Chiefs won fair and square. And I think that's a play where good on Andy for calling a double move and getting him in a position to make a mistake.
Hey, the irony real quick about that play is that if he had given the touchdown, the Eagles would have had more time to actually go down the field.
It was a blunder. The Eagles, they would have. I'll give the Eagles their flowers here. They went for a lot of the fourth downs that not many teams would have. They took a delay a game when most teams would have called a timeout and wasted a timeout. Now they messed up a later one in the game, but that was a play where I know football's hard. Football's a difficult game, and anybody who's played, it is moving fast. But it's weird because that was the worst thing. The touchdown was not the worst thing that could have happened to the Eagles on that play. It was exactly what happened, which was a first down that didn't result in a touchdown, because then the game's over. And, I think some situational, and again, it's hard to tell a guy like, hey, if a guy beats you, just let him score. But like that was, of course, it was a big, I think people are mad more because that was a big break for the Chiefs as far as the game state, not necessarily that it wasn't a penalty, but more like, oh, wow, if we would have got Hurts again, had Juju just beat him cleanly and got a touchdown there. And I think that's, something, that's why people are upset more than they don't believe it was a hold.
A couple things. The guy said he held here. What's the issue? I am tired of the delay a game. Like, you get like 2 extra seconds. Like, enough. Why do we have a clock?
Yeah, I mean, Lane Johnson jumped on like every play. I mean, I don't know.
It was called it.
The
Eagles.
The official
finally, but it happened. It wasn't just this game. It happens all
every
the
game.
Time. That it happens. Like, enough. Like,
officiating in the NFL is not very good. I will still argue that it's not biased it's not biased against your favorite team. Yeah. That's why.
Yeah. I don't get, why can't you put like a red square around the game clock like you do in the NBA with the shot clock, so when it fucking goes off,
the whole field should light up yellow or something when the play clock goes off.
Well, they have all those lights now that like the lights can change colors instantly. The whole building can go red when it goes there. I don't get it.
It is weird.
And how about this one? Temecula says the rugby sneak's got to go. The Giants or Dallas lose a playoff game to Philly because of that, in a critical situation, there'd be outrage. I don't know. I actually love it. I think I hated watching it converted on my team, but I think it's just good coaching.
Don't give up 8 yards on first and second down.
Yeah, I agree. I got no problem with that one. All right. If the Eagles had gotten the ball Jeff? Do they score? Like, had the Chiefs punched it in, if McKinnon goes on in and scores and they get the ball, do you think the Eagles win?
Good chance. I mean, I think that the way they moved the ball in the previous drive, I think whoever had the ball last in this game was going to win. And the Chiefs had it last and they won. I think if the Eagles had gotten it last, I think they would have won the game.
Eric?
Probably 40-60. I think the Chiefs, base rates would suggest they could get a stop there, especially because the Eagles were only one more timeout left. So, and their quarterback, I know Hurts was explosive in that game, but we saw the limitations to his arm on the last play. They only scored the game tying touchdown because the Chiefs absolutely blew a coverage in that Devontae Smith catch. So I have a little bit more faith, but yeah, look, Hurts played a wonderful game, and if he got the ball, I think every Chiefs fan would have been worried, and rightfully so.
Well, I think the thing Eagles fans I'd be talking about is I don't think Jalen Hurts was healthy. You just look at that last throw. I think he threw a lollipop throw to AJ Brown, who did a great job of adjusting on it, making a play, and give Hurts credit for sending the ball down there. But I don't think he's healthy.
Hurts was if he was healthy, it would have been like crazy. He had a phenomenal game.
I know.
That play,
I agree.
You think about how close that game. What if Michael Dana gets him down on that 4th and 5? I thought Hurts was a stronger runner than even I thought. I thought that was what he brought to the game. And the throws, like the throw to Goddard was nails on that 3rd and after the delay game. He had some really good throws, but I agree his deep ball. Honestly, the throw to Devontae Smith, he leads them out of bounds. So there were certainly some nitpicking on Hurts' game, but for the most part, Hurts played a fabulous game.
All right, a couple more real quick before we get out of here. Let's talk about this. Is this a dynasty? Jeff, you ready to call it a dynasty? What does it take to be a dynasty?
You got to win 3. I don't. If this isn't a dynasty, if this is a dynasty, then all of a sudden the Denver Broncos become a dynasty. Who else has 2? The Steelers. They went to what 2 in like 6 years with 3 and 6 years with Roethlisberger and 1-2.
Yeah, 05
right?
and
2005, 08, and they went lost to the Packers in 10. So I think you have to separate from that group. They got a great opportunity. No question. It's obviously great quarterback, young supporting cast, a lot of draft picks. I think when Mahomes got going after he won his first one, I thought he'll probably play in 5, win 3. I think he'll probably play in 6, win 4 now. How that gets stretched out, I don't know. But if they win 3 in 9 years, that'd be a dynasty. I think they got a 2-year window to work with here to make that happen.
Eric?
I agree with Jeff. I think that one more is probably attainable, but needs to be attainable. So I'll say it like this. I think by the time it's all said and done, yes, it will be a dynasty. But I think right now you still have to get another one in the trophy case before I'll call it that. But it's hard to see them not doing it, right? The league only opens up for them more and more and more with the Bengals and the Chargers having to pay their quarterback and the Bills declining a little bit and so forth. So they're set up really nicely.
Yeah, $13 million under the cap. They can clear another $21 million by cutting Frank Clark. They do have big decisions to make. Orlando Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, McCole Hardman. Who's going to play DN? There's work to be done. But Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes is a hell of a start, and not being way over the cap. Bills are over the cap right now, right? They got cuts to make.
So are the Jags, and so teams like that, the Chargers are too.
Yeah, so they're in a pretty good spot for what they want to do. All right, here's your chance, Jeff. The Chiefs repeat.
No.
I love Jeff. I think this is my favorite thing about Jeff.
Yeah. Did they repeat last time? I didn't pick them then for the same reason I'm not picking them now. It's like teams don't repeat in this league. Last team to do it was
true. But guys,
the Pats.
People forget though that no one wins the MVP and the Super Bowl in the same season. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But too many things could happen. Look, and I say that because they were great this year. They were also very, very healthy. Very healthy. And so when you're talking about what happened to the Rams this year. You talk about what happened to the Niners this year. You talk about what happened to the Bucks 2 years ago. Those things can happen to the Chiefs easily. I mean, it's just the odds, as someone just said, are in my favor with this one.
They are.
They are. However, folks, Mahomes got injured in the playoffs, and they still won the freaking Super Bowl. Like I feel like, we forget that Chad Henne had to make a drive.
No more Chad Henne. There you go.
True. Who's going to come off the bench? Do we bring Matt Moore back from some high school in Oregon to be the backup?
Well, I like this from Brett. When you're a young team, you stay healthy, and they're one of the youngest teams in the league.
Niners were young, weren't they?
I don't know. I seem to remember the Chiefs having 3 rookie corners, and then Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Marcus Kemp, and Sky Moore as the 3 wide receivers in the AFC Championship game for a significant part of that game. I do think, though, Jeff's right. I mean, it is hard. I think that they'll be favored, and we talked about all year.
Yeah.
The Bills being
already
favored.
are.
Yeah. Here's not to play host, but like, when's the next time a team other than Kansas City will be the preseason favorite to win the Super Bowl in the NFL? When's the next time we see that?
Well, I don't think. I mean, listen, it may be a long time, but the Bengals are
favored this year, right?
And the Bengals have room to maneuver, and it could be the Bengals come next year. I mean,
but the Bengals pay Higgins, Chase, and Burrow over the next 2 years. That's $100 million in a $240 million cap. Like that, the things get real fair for them real quick.
Yeah. There's no doubt.
Anarumo gets a head coaching job. Yeah. Like all these things we talk about the Chiefs overcoming this year.
But listen, if they move T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd for draft picks, and they hit on another wideout, and they're paying just Chase, and they get a left tackle with some of those picks. I mean,
and we just gave Brett Veach his flowers for doing that because no one freaking does that.
Do I have to do this again? Do you remember the Chiefs kicking the holy crap out of the Bengals in that game or something? Because that ain't the game that I saw.
Yeah.
Like I'm more bullish on saying they'll win again than I am talking down the Bengals, right? Like they're young. They're third youngest, by the way. The stat I saw was Texans, Bears, Chiefs. And that should scare you because part of the reason the teams are young is because they've sucked and they punted and they're completely starting over. This team is young, like a crappy team, but they're really good. So that's a reason to be bullish on them to come back. But there's no need to talk down the Bills, and definitely not the Bengals who have cap room.
Those teams have great quarterbacks too. Great quarterbacks and really good coaches. I mean, they'll be in the mix. That's why I think dominant teams, like if this was 1993, I think when the Cowboys were going to be together for 10 years, different story. Yeah, things change every year. This team is proof of it. Everybody's sitting here saying, how are they going with all these rookies, all these young guys? It can happen again for somebody else.
Yeah, it absolutely can. Listen, it's been a great run. They've been there every time. Like the odds kind of are that if Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid stay around, at some point they're going to win back-to-back. Because they're going to be good enough that they're like good enough to be in the championship game and win the championship game almost every year. So at some point they should probably put back-to-back together. Why not now? That to me is, again, odds are they won't. But if you want to take a shot, take your shot right now. This would be the time to do it. Look, we got a lot to talk about in the offseason. Chris Jones, Orlando Brown, the wide receiving core, where the Chiefs go in the draft. In fact, I'll be honest with you, some of the offseason shows are my absolute favorites. So we look forward to everybody. We appreciate everybody listening all throughout the season. It's been a great run to a championship here on the Red, Gold, and Bold, and we're not done yet. We'll be back at it next week as well, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. I want to thank our fine sponsor, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. I can't stress it enough. If you're looking, they're hiring. They do a fantastic job. Great people. I've spent a lot of time with the folks over at Gann. And if you're looking for a great company to work for, project managers, truck drivers, all positions, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour with paid time off and insurance. Check it out at GannAsphalt.com. We're back at it tomorrow. We'll stream live at 9 p.m. Central with the Two Deep. We'll cover some more of the Chiefs news as it pertains to the league as a whole. That's our NFL podcast. and there's been a lot of NFL news, and we'll talk some more about the Eagles and where they go from here next when we do that on the 2D podcast. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Super Sports, my name is Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Red, Gold, and Bold.